So now I'm really delighted to be introducing to you Jeffrey Veidlinger, who we'll see a moment up there on the screen. Jeffrey Veidlinger is the Joseph Brodsky Collegiate Professor of History and Judaic Studies at the University of Michigan. His research focuses on modern Jewish history, modern Russia and Eastern Europe, and Holocaust and oral memory. Jeffrey has been my colleague for a good number of years on the academic committee of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and in that capacity I've been so impressed with his rigor, his insights, and his creativity. He's the author of several award-winning books, and they include, I won't mention them all, but they include the Moscow State Yiddish Theater, Jewish Culture on the Soviet Stage, Jewish Public Culture in the Late Russian Empire, and In the Shadow of the Shtetl, Small-Town Jewish Life in Soviet Ukraine. Today's award in the category of history honors his most recent book, In the Midst of Civilized Europe, the Pogroms of 1918 to 1921, and the Onset of the Holocaust. The history of these mass murders in early 20th century of the Jews of Ukraine in the years immediately following the First World War is an understudied history. It's overshadowed by the brutality of the Nazi regime, which came soon after. In his eloquent and searing book, In the Midst of Civilized Europe, Jeffrey Veidlinger masterfully reverses and reclaims that understudied history, using a range of archival materials and documents. He enables us to see these events. He gathers materials that describes them through the eyes of survivor victims, through the eyes of perpetrators, through the eyes of government officials and other eyewitnesses. Veidlinger traces the link between this earlier violence and the genocidal violence of the Nazi regime, and draws a line that extends the implications of this to contemporary events. So I'm going to shift out of your way so that you can give Jeffrey Veidlinger on the screen your full attention.
It's a great honor to have my book recognized by the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. It means a lot to me to have the acclamation of the jury, and I would like to congratulate all the other winners. In the Midst of Civilized Europe tells the tragic story of the anti-Jewish pogroms, or ethnic riots, that killed at least 100,000 Jews in some 500 different cities, towns, and villages throughout what is now Ukraine after the First World War. At the time, this violence shocked the world. There were mass demonstrations in London and New York. World leaders discussed it at the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, and newspapers published accounts in Palestine, Moscow, and Berlin. Today, though, these pogroms have been almost completely forgotten, overshadowed by the Holocaust 20 years later. Yet, as my book argues, we can't really understand the Holocaust until we recognize it as a continuation of this violence that preceded it. The mass murder of Jews in Eastern Europe really began some 15 years before Hitler came to power. In 1919, for instance, aid workers on the ground were warning of the wholesale physical extermination of the Jewish race. The New York Times quoted one activist who raised alarms that 6 million souls in Ukraine and in Poland have received notice that they are going to be completely exterminated. In other words, for those who witnessed the pogroms of 1918 to 1921, the Holocaust was hardly inconceivable. Rather, it was the logical next step. The disturbing irony that frames this book is that these pogroms occurred just as the Russian Revolution ousted the Tsar, and a newly established independent Ukrainian state was promising what was then the world's largest Jewish population a new era of peace and prosperity. As the people of Ukraine today fight for a pluralistic and democratic future in the face of Russian aggression once again, the lessons of this book have never been more important. I'm grateful to the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards for this recognition. And thank you all.